Some cooking videos are more rewarding than others. This one is going to be quite rewarding. Hey, I'm Matt with Meat Church here in the Traeger kitchen. Very excited today to be cooking prime rib with you guys. This is my absolute favorite thing to make during the holidays. I do a lot of holiday recipes, everything from turkeys to tenderloins, but this is it for me. It gets no better. Absolutely my favorite cut in the world to cook. It's delicious. You know, I grew up when I got out of college, like going to Vegas and going to prime rib buffets. And I think that's what hooked me on this. Some people are intimidated by it because it's honestly an expensive piece of meat, but it's one of the easiest things you could ever cook. And this will definitely be the centerpiece of your holiday meal. And the great thing about it, it's a big piece of meat. So there'll be varying donenesses throughout the piece of meat. We'll talk about that a little bit later. So it'll really appease a crowd. Whether you like a medium rare or a medium, you'll get all of that when you cook this piece of meat. So let's jump in. What do we have here? So this basically, I'm gonna flip around and kind of show you. You would recognize this side looks like a ribeye steak. If you were to slice this direction into 1.5 inch thick steaks, you would have a bunch of ribeye steaks. So this is a rib roast. This one is a boneless rib roast. I'll tell you a little difference in the 3 types of prime ribs that you can have. Prime rib, by the way, does not mean that it's prime grade. That's just the name. You can take a choice grade of meat and make an amazing prime rib. I love that around the holidays because they're often on sale and affordable. But this one in particular is a boneless. There's also a bone-in and a standing rib. So what are the pros and cons? On a boneless, the reason that I kind of like this is you can season all around the entire piece of meat, and then when you're done cooking, you don't have to deal with the bones. You don't have to cut them off. Slicing is very easy. Bone-in, when you season the entire thing, if you don't remove the bones, then you're not gonna have any seasoning on the underneath side of the meat right here because there would be bones right here. So if I ever get a bone-in prime rib, I like to actually slice the bones away, season around this entire roast, and truss the bones back on it, and that's what's known as a standing rib roast. So those are your kind of 3 types. They all have pros and cons. Boneless is definitely the easiest for you to prepare, especially if you've never done it. So that's what we are doing today, but they're all great options, to be honest with you. So the first thing that I want to do is any trim work that you need to do. This was expensive, and so I don't want to take a whole lot off of it. Anytime I trim, I always say that's your choice. If you want to trim it to be really even, you can. Or if you want to leave it all to maximize bites, you can do that too. But this one has some stuff kind of hanging off of it that I want to remove away. And I usually will feel around, and if it's too heavy of fat on it, I will generally kind of shave that away. You can leave it if you want. Prime rib will cook for a long time, so it's nice to have some fat on the outside, but where it's just really hard, I prefer to remove that. So I'm just gonna lay my knife flat and just fillet just a little bit away. And this one is the end of the rib roast. This, you see where it's been sliced, really nice and even. The end down here, it kind of isn't like super even. So I'm going to choose to take a very thin slice off the edge just to even it up. All right, next thing I'm gonna do, optional step, but something that I like doing, is taking kosher salt and heavily salting this prime rib. And this does a few things. I do the same thing with steaks, by the way. This will help tenderness, it helps moisture retention. Now this is not a crazy overnight salt brine. What I'm doing is thoroughly covering this, and I'm gonna set it aside for an hour or 2. You could do this for as little as an hour. You can do it for a few hours. You know, for this size piece of meat, I'd probably do 4 at the most. But we're just gonna do a couple hours on this, and we're gonna rinse it off. All right, back on the rack we go. Okay, good news is I have one that's been in the salt already. So this one has been sitting for a couple hours, and I need to get it rinsed off so that I can move on to the next step. So let's head to the sink. All right, here we go. It's all rinsed off, ready to roll. All right, next step, so we need to season this prime rib. But first, something I started doing last year, which is nice, another optional step, but a good way to build flavor, is I slather in my friend's W sauce. So this is a Worcestershire sauce. It's what I consider a pretty complex Worcestershire sauce. It's not, you know, the one you grew up on that's really thin. As you can see, as I pour this out, it is quite thick. I'm just gonna do this with my hand, but this adds a pretty delicious element. I do the same thing with tenderloins. I have yet to meet someone who doesn't like it. So give this a shot if you like. Otherwise, you can just season. It's cooking. Don't be afraid to get messy with it. Have fun with it. So now let's talk seasoning. Obviously at Meat Church, I'm gonna pour some in a bowl because, pro tip, we're gonna baste with this later. Okay. So my beef rub, Meat Church Holy Cow, is my favorite to do steaks, prime ribs. It's salt, pepper, garlic. So it's an SPG. Also very popular on brisket, but use what you like. Traeger prime rib rub is delicious. Coffee rubs would be delicious. Just kind of whatever your preference is. But this is definitely a winner. This is very fresh. It's got coarse 16 mesh black pepper in it. And honestly, I'm gonna give this what I would consider a pretty liberal coating. And that's because this is a big piece of meat. When you're done cooking this, you're going to slice this direction. And so you're gonna have a ton of meat and not a lot of seasoning. So it's honestly pretty difficult to over season this. So just season it on all sides. Also, I like to season about 18 inches, 24 inches high. I recommend seasoning a little bit higher. When you season down low, you get kind of splotchy with your seasoning, so you'll be a lot more even when you season up high. All right, that looks nice. And the little topper bonus are garlic and herb seasonings, an Italian seasoning. It's a fairly delicate seasoning, not a lot of salt, so you can actually put quite a bit of this on here. This is a great combination for beef, just like I mentioned earlier, something I also do on steak. So this just gives an added element, particularly at the holidays with the herbs on it. It's just a nice touch, good flavor, people love it. So I go pretty heavy with this one. If you're making mashed potatoes with your holiday meal, load it up with this. All right, we're good to go. Give it, 15 minutes at a minimum, but on a really big cut. I would love to do it for an hour, but a really good tip would be to do this the day before you're gonna cook it. So if you're cooking this on, during the holiday season, like on Christmas Eve, something like that, it's okay to do all of this prep the night before. Leave it on a wire rack like this, cover it with saran wrap, foil, throw it in your fridge, let it sit so you don't have to do any prep on kind of your big day, especially if you're feeding a big crowd and you got a lot of things going on. Prep as much as you can in advance. But let's talk about cooking. So today we're cooking on a Traeger at 275 degrees. So wood is your first ingredient when it comes to cooking. So I want to pair things accordingly. When it comes to beef, I want a heavier smoking wood. So I love hickory. I also love mesquite. I love the Meat Church blend, which is oak and hickory. I love the signature blend. I would stay away from lighter smoking woods like maple, alder, or fruit woods because I want this to impart some serious smoke, but that's up to you and your preference. If you want a more subtle smoke, then go with a lighter smoke, but this will smoke for a while because it's a pretty big piece of meat, and so I want it to be smoky. So big, wide piece of meat. The challenge with cooking something this big is you are going to be focusing on the middle of the piece of meat, which is gonna take the longest to cook, right? So we're going to insert a meter thermometer, which is amazing. So I can untether myself from my grill and I can go live my life and still know where my meat's at. So I'm gonna stick this in to where the tip is in the middle. So I'm monitoring the dead middle of the prime rib. I love medium rare when it comes to steaks, which is 130 to 135 degrees. So what I'm going to target on this prime rib is I'm going to cook this to 125 in the middle. when I pull it off the Traeger, it's gonna carry over, cook a few more degrees, and hopefully get to no more than 130. So when I slice this in the middle, we'll have medium rare in the middle. But because this is so big, as you move to the outer edges, you're going to be more done on the outside edge. So this works great for my family. So I'll make the first slice off of this, and this will go to my wife because she likes medium, which is 140. And then as you work your way to the middle, you have less doneness. So therefore you can serve, a lot of different, you can satisfy a lot of different appetites with this big cut of meat, but you're focusing on getting the middle cooked. So into the Traeger we go. You see that we've got a couple more in here. So I've got one in the middle that is about midway through cooking. And so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and baste with more of this W sauce. And I like to do this multiple times throughout the cook. You're building flavors, just layers of flavor. And this stuff is not gonna burn, so you can do it several times. This just adds an element of deliciousness. Looks awesome. All right, now we've got one over here that is actually at 125 degrees. I was at about 120 when we started this video, so I know it's gonna be about 125 right now. It's been basted a couple times with this Worcestershire sauce. You can baste it again right now if you want. I'm just gonna go ahead and pull it off because it smells amazing and I'm ready to eat. So I use an insulated glove setup, just kind of my preference. You can use the big Traeger spatula if you want. This is just something that I'm used to. Latex gloves on top. This way you can actually feel your meat and what you're doing. Pull my meter out. All right, so that looks delicious. So another little trick. I like to rest in butter. Same thing with my steak. So I'm just gonna make some slices, some pats of butter, just rest it across the top, lightly tint it with foil. You need to let this rest at least 15, 20 minutes, let it come down in temperature before we move into slicing. You can use a compound butter if you want. I'm not really trying to change the flavor profiles that we set out with a Holy Cow and the W sauce. So we're just going with a really good unsalted butter. You don't really want to use salted butter because I don't know how much it would hurt it, but with all the seasoning you have on here, I'm not trying to add any more salt to that. So unsalted is just fine for this. Get out your small roll of aluminum foil. And this is what I call a light tint. So you're not trying to wrap it up and trap the heat in. I want this thing to stop cooking. That roll of aluminum foil may have been heavier than this prime rib. So it's just lightly tinted here. It's gonna cool down. We're gonna just let it hang out here and then we'll slice it and see how we did. That is the biggest roll of foil I've ever seen in my life. Like, I use food service foil and my rolls aren't that big. That's awesome. Well, it's rested. Butter is melted. It looks and smells glorious, to be honest with you. I mean, look at that. Whew. Man, I can't wait for this. Some cooking videos are more rewarding than others, and this one is gonna be quite rewarding. Here we go. Well, what I'm gonna do at first is I'm just gonna slice down the middle, since that's where I told you we were focusing. I ain't mad at that. That's perfection for me. Again, personal preference on your doneness. So I'm gonna put these together just like I do with a brisket and take a few slices. God almighty, it looks good. And this is what I want. I want, just under medium rare for me personally. And then I like to finish with a flaky salt. So we've got some like Maldon flake salt here, imparting some serious Salt Bay vibes. Where's he gonna jump in? I wanna make sure for this test bite, I get some of that outside right there. Look how tender that is. When you can just pull it apart like that. Ooh. Unbelievable. Not supposed to take 2 bites when you're doing a cooking video, but that's so good, I don't care. The tenderness, the smoky, I mean, the beef rub on top, so good. And honestly, just like the right amount of smoke out of the Traeger. This is delicious. This is a home run. You can't miss with this. You can't screw it up. I mean, you can if you don't pay attention, but with the meter right in the middle, monitoring your temperature, if you're paying attention, you're not gonna screw this up. You're not gonna waste your money. You're gonna be a hero during the holidays. You guys have to do this. The recipe is down below the video in the description. It's also on Traeger.com. But while you're there, make sure that you like and subscribe because we're doing weekly recipe videos for you guys. So with that said, we'll see y'all next week.